Good to have you with us on this Sunday evening. I'm Daniel Che with the latest at this hour. Typhoon Nakri has come and left, but it did flood Cheongdo Valley in Gyeongsangbuk-do province on Sunday, killing all 7 members of a family that were traveling in the same vehicle. Although the worst has passed, wind and rain are expected in Seoul and the central part of the country this week. The typhoon pounded Jeju Island on Saturday with heavy rains and gale-force winds that briefly cut power to some 1,600 homes. More than 200 international and domestic flights at Jeju International Airport were cancelled as well. Across the southern part of the country, there were reports of destroyed buildings, broken traffic lights, and fallen trees. And now we have another storm brewing in the form of Super Typhoon Halong. It is expected to hit southern Japan later in the week with winds of 250 kilometers per hour, and Korea and northeastern China could also be in the storm's path. President Park Geun-hye has nominated a mass communications and design expert as her new culture minister. Kim Jong-duk, a professor of visual communication design at Hongik University, was named on Sunday. The presidential office cited Kim's experience and expertise in the arts and his leadership as qualities that would help him realize President Park's key state goal of cultural prosperity. Sunday's nomination also comes more than 2 weeks after the president's previous nominee withdrew amid allegations of perjury at his confirmation hearing. The recent nomination also comes after President Park named Hwang Woo-yeol as her education minister. The confirmation of both Kim and Hwang would give President Park a complete set of members for her new cabinet. Continual development of weapons and rocket and artillery launches is not a choice but a must as long as U.S. threats against Pyongyang continue. That's according to North Korea's main newspaper, Yodong Shinmun. The paper claims that no other country in the world is under constant threat like North Korea is, and says that the North needs weapons upgrades and displays of military might to deter such threats. The paper went on to criticize the recent Ulchi Freedom Guardian exercise between South Korea and the United States. North Korea has long denounced such annual drills as a rehearsal for an invasion of North Korea. Seoul and Washington say the exercises are purely defensive. Korea and the United States will hold their second round of high-level talks on the transfer of wartime operational control from Washington to Seoul for 2 days, beginning on Wednesday in Washington, D.C. Diplomatic sources say there are expectations of an outline of the timing and conditions for the OPCON transfer, as the talks are taking place just 2 months ahead of the annual security consultative meeting between the two countries. Discussions are also expected to include an assessment of the South Korean military's response capability against North Korea's nuclear threats. The heads of the delegation will be Deputy Defense Minister Ryu Jae-seung and Deputy Assistant Secretary of Defense for East Asia, David Helvey. Efforts to contain the deadly Ebola outbreak in West Africa have not stopped the fear of widespread contamination. Residents in the most affected countries worry as the dead are buried, and there is growing concern among people in the U.S. as an infected aid worker arrives for treatment. Our Kwon So-wa has this report.
The death toll from the Ebola outbreak has reached an alarming 729, which according to the World Health Organization is likely to be even higher. The fear and panic among residents in the countries most affected is rising. People in a village in Liberia, one of the 3 African countries hit hardest by the outbreak, chased away health workers and soldiers who tried to bury victims in local areas. Although the victims are buried in plastic bags, residents fear catching the disease. Some yelled, "You'd have to kill us all first," to the soldiers. Concerns about the outbreak hit home in the U.S. on Saturday as an American aid worker who contracted Ebola arrived at an Atlanta hospital for treatment. Dr. Kent Brantley is the first of 2 American aid workers to be treated in the U.S. The medical personnel handling the case made sure he was traveling under the highest level of protection from the plane to his suit. But while some people say it's fair to allow a U.S. citizen to be treated in his own country, others fear a local outbreak. The other aid worker, Nancy Wrightball, is expected to be transported to the hospital within the next few days. Meanwhile, the leaders of the worst-hit areas in West Africa and international health organizations are stepping up the fight against Ebola by setting up quarantine areas and closing schools. The World Health Organization will hold an emergency meeting on Wednesday to discuss the outbreak. Kwon So-ah, ARIRANG News.
Japanese Prime Minister Shinzo Abe's attempts to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping appears to have begun last month. That's when former Japanese Prime Minister Yasuo Fukuda was reported to have made a secret visit to Beijing to meet with Chinese President Xi Jinping. The two reportedly explored the possibility of arranging a meeting between Xi and Abe. Abe has recently been calling for a summit between the two, and earlier today he reiterated his desire to meet with Xi on the sidelines of the upcoming APEC summit in Beijing in November. Relations between China and Japan have soured over a disputed island chain in the East Sea and Abe's visits to the Yasukuni Shrine. Japan raised tensions late last month by conducting a series of defense drills in Hawaii. Israel began scaling back its forces in Gaza on Saturday. It also pulled out of ceasefire negotiations and warned that plugging up Hamas militants' cross-border tunnels is not the end of their military's mission. Rather than trying to end the 26-day-old operation, the latest move appears to be part of plans to regroup as Israel's leadership, divided over how to deal with Hamas, decides its next step. Israel's initial goal was to destroy some 30 Hamas guerrilla tunnels, but Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu said that the military will prepare for continued action according to the country's security needs. Meanwhile, Hamas has refused to back down, vowing to continue its offensive against Israeli forces. The ongoing clash has so far resulted in over 1,600 Palestinian deaths and broken promises of a truce. Shifting gears now to different stories, the Korean government is aiming to lure more Chinese tourists to the country with a plan to ease visa entry requirements and business regulations. Here's our Kim Ji-yeon with this report.
The number of Chinese people visiting Korea is on the rise, and the Korean government seems to want to keep it that way. Around 574,000 Chinese tourists visited Korea in June. That's almost half the total number of foreign tourists in the same period. The government says it will ease the visa application process and visa regulations for Chinese tourists by increasing the number of multiple entry visas so that more tourists can re-enter the country on a single visa. Authorities have also given the green light to the establishment of resort complexes with casinos and medical and education centers on the islands of Gyeongsangbuk-do and Cheongdo, which are near Incheon Airport, and Jeju Island in the south. The government is also allowing the establishment of for-profit hospitals and medical centers for foreigners in 8 free economic zones in Jeju Island in order to serve the rising number of medical tourists visiting the country. At least 10% of medical practitioners employed at the for-profit hospitals should have licenses from foreign countries, and the director of the hospital must be a foreign national. Kim Ji-yeon, ARIRANG News.
We're in the middle of the dog days of summer right now here in Korea, but farmers, it's never too early for them to begin thinking about Korea's harsh winter months and protecting their crops. To that end, a new type of heating system is catching fire, and for good reasons, according to our Paul Yi.
This is a 6,000 square meter vinyl greenhouse in Cheongdo province that cultivates tomatoes. Heating it over past winter months would have cost the owner as much as $30,000 US. This past winter, it cost him just $3,000.
Now I only spend 1/10 of what I used to pay when I used a fuel-operated fan heater. It is a lot economical and profitable since it also reduces the harvest time by a month.
What's Yi's secret? He's using a newly developed heater called a carbon heating net that is buried underground in furrows between rows of tomato plants. It's placed 50 centimeters deep in the soil, and when connected to electricity, the ideal temperature for the roots of the plant is maintained. The system also promotes the growth of crops, increasing production while reducing the time needed for harvest. This carbon heating net is made with carbon and silicon in the form of a net and can adjust the temperature automatically to provide better insulation and save power. A local institute tested its efficiency, and experts view it as a promising development.
Because it raises the temperature of the roots, the growth period of crops in the early stages can be reduced by 2 weeks.
With high oil prices in the country, many farmers hope this low-energy device will take some of the sting out of Korea's harsh winter months. Paul Yi, ARIRANG News.
Well, tropical cyclone Nakri has come and gone, but a light drizzle is expected to continue in most parts of Korea. We're also expecting strong winds and waves, so people are advised to stay off the beaches for now. Here's a look at the weather conditions elsewhere around the globe. And that does it for us for now. For more updates, do join us again at 10 p.m. Korea time. Thank you for watching.